I'm not married. I don't have an apartment. I have no home. It's very disturbing to me.
She was once considered the purest symbol of American television in the 1970s. Susan Dey, a teenage girl barely past 18, skyrocketed into a pop culture icon. Crystal clear beauty, natural talent, and a smile that melted millions of hearts. Yet the brighter she shined on screen as the perfectly composed Laurie Partridge, the more her life behind the scenes was covered in fractures. A childhood shattered by the loss of her mother at age 8, the suffocating pressure of fame driving her into extreme dieting until her body nearly gave out. A long, unspoken love for her co-star, ending not in romance, but in betrayal splashed across tabloids. And in the end, she disappeared from Hollywood, rejecting reunion invitations and severing all ties with the past that had wounded her. What happened to the star once hailed as America's youth treasure? Why did a rising icon at the height of glory choose to walk away in silence? And what truth lies behind the smile Susan Dey always tried so hard to protect? This is the untold story, where dazzling spotlight meets the quietest tragedies of a life lived behind the curtain. Susan Dey was born on December 10, 1952, in Illinois, into a middle-class family where her father worked as a newspaper editor and her mother was a nurse. Her early childhood seemed like it would unfold peacefully like any other child's, but life did not grant her calm for long. When Susan was 8 years old, her mother passed away suddenly. That shock became a silent wound that followed her throughout her life, both a source of grief and a void that could never be filled. Little Susan didn't scream or lash out. Instead, she learned silence, folded into herself, and grew up faster than her age. After the devastating loss, Susan's father moved the children to New York, where he remarried Gail, a practical and perceptive woman. More than a stepmother, Gail unknowingly became the person who opened the door to Susan's future. Seeing her unique beauty and natural innocence, she took photos and sent them to modeling agencies. Susan herself didn't yet believe in her own worth, but Gail kept nudging her toward the spotlight, a place that would later lift her to dazzling fame, while also dragging her into deep emotional valleys she would struggle to escape. Susan's first modeling contracts came when she was just 15. Her gentle features, soulful eyes, and a presence that was both innocent and striking made her stand out among teenage models. For the first time, Susan felt a sense of validation she had once feared she didn't deserve. But she had no way of knowing that the spotlight arriving so early would soon demand a price far from cheap. Photo shoots and magazine covers, they were only the beginning of a whirlwind career that Susan was never emotionally prepared to face. In 1970, when Susan Dey had just turned 18, a modeling photo of hers unexpectedly caught the eye of an ABC producer, and fate took a sharp turn onto a completely different path. With no formal acting training, no prior experience in film or television, she still earned the role of Laurie Partridge in the musical sitcom The Partridge Family after only a few auditions. Her natural charm, expressive eyes, and pure presence convinced producers that they had found the ideal teenage girl Americans were longing to see. And they were right. Laurie Partridge immediately became one of the most beloved characters on early 70s television. The Partridge Family became a cultural phenomenon from the very first season, with soaring ratings, hit albums, and an unprecedented explosion of fan devotion. Susan's face was everywhere, on posters in magazines, even plastered on school notebooks and bedroom walls across America. Bags of fan mail arrived at the studio every week, and a girl who had stumbled into modeling thanks to her stepmother's encouragement suddenly became a national teen idol, far too fast for her young heart to process. But to maintain that perfect girl image, Susan paid with her own health. Producers constantly pushed her to stay as thin as possible to meet the era's television beauty standards. Terrified of criticism and consumed by the public gaze, she began extreme dieting, at one point living only on carrots and celery. Her weight dropped to just 41 kilograms. Her arms were so thin they looked as though they might snap from a single touch. Yet every time the camera rolled, she smiled as if everything were flawless. Despite having no professional foundation, Susan threw herself into learning to act, harmonize, and play piano while filming. Learning on the job, fighting to catch her breath beneath the weight of sudden fame. The Partridge Family ran for 4 seasons, producing numerous charting songs, best-selling albums, and multiple television nominations. The brighter the spotlight grew, the deeper the cracks inside Susan became. At the peak of her success, she faced a terrifying emptiness. Who would see the loneliness of a girl forced to grow up too fast? In 1972, as the show's popularity swept across America, Susan made her film debut in Skyjacked, starring alongside Hollywood legend Charlton Heston. Only 2 years earlier, she had never stood in front of a camera. Now, she was on the big screen. It was both dazzling and frightening. The role wasn't the lead, but enough to show audiences and filmmakers that Susan was more than a smile and teenage beauty. She had the potential to be a real actress. That same year, she released her book Secrets on Boys, Beauty, and Popularity, becoming a role model for American teenage girls. Her simple beauty tips and relatable advice turned the book into a bestseller. People didn't just want to watch her sing and act, they wanted to be like her. But the greater the fame, the darker the shadows behind it. The Partridge Family came to an end in 1974, while still at the top, leaving millions of fans heartbroken, and a young star who hadn't yet had a moment to breathe amid the glitter. When the lights went out and the sparkly backdrop fell away, what remained was a thinner, quieter Susan, haunted by the fear that she would always be trapped as Laurie Partridge, a girl much happier than she was in real life. Fame had come easily, but escaping it would be the true battle, one that would nearly cost her her identity. Because just when everyone thought the fairy tale had ended, Susan was about to enter the most challenging chapter of her life, proving to the world that she was more than just the eldest Partridge girl. After the Partridge Family ended, Susan entered the phase every former teen star fears, escaping the shadow of the very character that made them famous. She continued with appearances in Hawaii Five-0, returned to film with Skyjacked, and later joined the 1978 series Little Women, a determined effort to prove she was capable of more than sweet teenage roles. But Hollywood wouldn't easily forget Laurie Partridge. Every time Susan stepped in front of a camera, people still saw the eldest Partridge sister. The feeling of being typecast became a persistent fear, and every new project came with the heavy pressure to be different. In 1977, Susan took a leap with the romantic sitcom Loves Me, Not, hoping it would mark a bold turning point in her career. But fate was unkind. Ratings dropped, the show was canceled after just 6 episodes, and that failure served as a harsh reminder that breaking away from her past would be far longer and more painful than she expected. That same year, however, she delivered a powerful performance in Mary Jane Harper Cried Last Night, portraying a young mother struggling through a psychological collapse. Positive critical response proved that beneath her pure and gentle image was an actress capable of reaching into the darkest corners of human emotion. It wasn't a blinding, euphoric spotlight like her Partridge Family fame, but it was a small flame that rekindled Susan's belief in herself. She could rise again in Hollywood through talent, not just as a teen idol of the past. But it would take a pivotal role in the 1980s for Susan to truly rewrite her position in the entertainment industry. a breakthrough no one believed she could achieve. In 1986, a fateful opportunity arrived when Susan was cast as Grace Van Owen in the television powerhouse L.A. Law. This wasn't just a role. It was the door that led her into the ranks of respected, serious actresses in Hollywood. L.A. Law brought together a brilliant creative team, portraying the fiercely competitive legal world of Los Angeles through high-profile cases that shook American society. Within that setting, Grace Van Owen, first a sharp-witted prosecutor and later a strong, independent, deeply compassionate judge, quickly became one of the show's central forces. The role demanded precision in every legal line, as well as emotional depth to portray the ethical conflicts faced by a woman-in-law. Susan captured the character with the maturity in her gaze, cold and resolute in the face of crime, yet allowing viewers to glimpse the cracks beneath her armor. L.A. Law rose to cultural phenomenon status, drawing tens of millions of viewers each week and helping NBC dominate prime time. For Susan personally, 1988 brought her a Golden Globe for Best Actress, along with 3 consecutive Emmy nominations. It was a spectacular transformation for a star once doubted after the Partridge Family. Beyond acting, Susan fiercely protected the character's depth. When writers planned a cliched romance storyline purely for ratings, she firmly objected and demanded contractual assurances that Grace would remain a woman with a career, a voice, not a decorative love interest. Because of her stance, Grace Van Owen became an icon of the modern woman, intelligent, self-possessed, and unwilling to sacrifice her worth for a cheap on-screen romance. Alongside L.A. Law's massive success, Susan continued challenging herself with emotionally heavy TV movies such as Lies and Lullabies, playing a pregnant woman addicted to drugs, further proving she was not just a lucky star, but a performer with real depth. Yet every spotlight has a price. At the height of her career, her personal life was about to enter a chapter of painful wounds no fame could shield her from. After conquering Hollywood with the sharp and commanding Grace Van Owen, Susan walked into a totally different battlefield, the live stage of Saturday Night Live. A dramatic actress thrust into a comedy institution where every misstep becomes a national joke. Yet, she appeared with confidence. She improvised, charmed, and surprised audiences with a natural sense of humor. It was her definitive statement. Susan Day was not a one-lucky role actress. She could do anything she set her heart to. But just when she was flying highest, the fall struck without warning. Love and War, the sitcom expected to keep her star burning hot, lasted only a few episodes before she was replaced for lack of chemistry with the male lead. A harsh decision, a slap to the pride of a newly crowned Golden Globe winner. But Susan didn't lash out, didn't beg, didn't cling to the spotlight at any cost. She walked away with dignity. If a project no longer respected her talent, she would leave. Leaving sitcoms behind, Susan chose a tougher road, returning to emotionally heavy roles. Lies and Lullabies, 1993, was a project she both starred in and co-produced, playing a pregnant cocaine addict stripped of her right to motherhood, fighting desperately to reclaim the last thread of hope in her life. It forced her to dig into psychological darkness fans had never seen before. Without tabloid hype, the film received strong critical praise. Susan had matured, as an actress and as an artist. After Lies and Lullabies, she continued seeking roles driven by truth rather than easy attention. She appeared in TV films like Bed of Lies, Deadly Love, and Blue River, gritty stories of crime, betrayal, and lives pushed to the edge. While none became mainstream hits, they affirmed one truth. Susan no longer chased fame. She chased authenticity in her characters. And with that integrity, she made audiences realize that the once innocent smile of America's sweetheart now belonged to an actress of shadows and depth. In 2002, Susan returned as Grace Van Owen in L.A. Law, the movie, a respectful nod to her greatest legacy. But it was also a gentle reminder she would only return when she felt it was worthy, not to cling to faded spotlight. Her appearances grew rarer, and that was her choice. By 2004, when she stepped into the role of Dr. Breen in Third Watch, Susan placed a final full stop on her more than three-decade journey in Hollywood. No press conference announcing retirement, no tears or grand farewell. She simply left. Quietly. Decisively. In the only way she had ever known. Protecting herself was more important than holding on to public attention. And that was when Susan's story entered its most private chapter, where fame was left behind, but the wounds of the past still lingered, quietly gnawing at the heart of the woman once celebrated as America's youth treasure. Once she stepped away from the spotlight, the old scars in Susan's life finally began to show. And the most painful of them all was the story that never found peace between her and David Cassidy. They first met as teenagers on the Partridge Family, both too young to understand the cost of fame. On screen, they were the perfect brother-sister duo, convincing millions of viewers that something warm and beautiful tied them together beyond music. But behind the scenes, Susan soon realized she had fallen in love with David, with his humor, with the brilliance he carried every time he walked onto the set. What she didn't know, or refused to admit, was that David lived in an entirely different world. A world overflowing with adoration, where girls surrounded him every night, where a one-sided love wasn't enough to hold down a boy running on the thrill of being idolized. Susan stayed, quietly listening to him talk about fleeting romances, hiding her hurt, as the man she loved saw her as nothing more than a carefree little sister. Everything rose and crumbled the night the Partridge family ended. David asked her out, a dinner Susan believed would finally bring them together. They spent the night together, a moment she thought was the miracle she had prayed for. But the next morning, that miracle vanished. David realized he couldn't give Susan what she longed for. That night for Susan was love. For David, it was guilt. If the story had ended there, time might have healed the wound. But in 1994, David published his memoir and detailed that night, in a tone that turned Susan's pure love into a tabloid spectacle. She felt the deepest sense of betrayal, not because he didn't love her, but because the most sacred piece of her heart had been exposed as public gossip. From that moment on, Susan cut off all contact with David Cassidy, and his too-late apology would never reach the person it was meant for. When David died in 2017, Susan remained silent. Not out of hatred, but because some pains shatter all over again when spoken aloud. David became the most beautiful yet cruel chapter in her life, the man she loved with all the innocence of youth, and the one who taught her that love doesn't always return love. After the door of hope with David slammed shut, Susan still had to keep going. And in that fragile moment, Dale McRaven entered her life as a rare breath of tenderness. Dale, a talented writer and producer who would later create successful sitcoms, didn't see Susan as America's flawless teen idol. He saw a young woman still struggling to find a safe place for her heart. They met when Susan's career was soaring, but her soul was covered in bruises. Dale gave her something she had never known: safety. No suffocating fame, no scrutiny, no expectation to be perfect. Just two young people leaning on each other to escape Hollywood storms. During their years together, Susan sometimes believed she had finally found the cure for the emotional void left from her childhood. Losing her mother too young had left her terrified of abandonment. Dale cared for her in all the right ways, gently filling the space David left behind. They shared quiet nights far from studio lights, spontaneous trips to flee the pressure of rising stardom. Dale may not have set her heart ablaze, but he was the one she could safely place it in. Yet Susan was being pulled rapidly up the slope of fame, while Dale remained behind the scenes. She had to choose between that quiet love and a career expanding beyond imagination, between the spotlight and a peaceful embrace with no promise of forever. As the Partridge family reached its peak, the distance between them stretched, not from lack of love, but because life pushed them down different paths. In the end, they parted. No fights, no scandals, no blame. Just two young people who never learned how to hold on while everything else was changing. And when that door closed, Susan carried with her a quiet sadness. The gentlest person arrived at the right time, but didn't have the strength to stay until the end. And then, before those old wounds could fully heal, Susan stepped into a very different kind of love. A relationship that seemed like it would be a safe home, but instead pushed her into a marriage full of challenges, forcing her to learn how to protect her heart all over again. After her gentle love with Dale came to an end, life led Susan down a completely different path, toward a man older, more experienced, and firmly established in the industry, Lenny Hersen. He was a veteran Hollywood talent agent who had represented some of the biggest stars of the era. With Lenny, Susan found the guidance she had longed for amid the whirlwind of fame. And to him, Susan was both a rising young actress and a fragile soul in need of protection. Their love wasn't fiery like youthful romances, but it was stable enough for Susan to believe in a secure future. Their 1976 wedding was quiet and simple, Susan's choice, as she had grown tired of life under public scrutiny. 2 years later, they welcomed their daughter Sarah, the greatest joy life had ever given her. During that period, Susan's heart seemed to heal. For the first time in a long while, she had a real family to call home. But Hollywood is never ideal for those who crave peace. The 25-year age gap, combined with the distance between a star still climbing upward and a man whose peak years were long behind him, slowly pushed them apart. Lenny's experience made him hope Susan would settle more, take fewer risks, the exact opposite of the creative fire burning inside her. Gradually, Susan felt trapped between two conflicting roles, a wife and mother expected to fulfill domestic duties, and an actress determined to break free from the shadow of Laurie Partridge to prove her true worth. The brighter her professional spotlight grew, the longer the shadows in her marriage became. Conversations faded into silence. Familiar hands grew distant. The more they tried to hold on, the more it hurt. By 1981, the marriage ended. No scandals, no accusations, just two people who no longer found peace beside each other. Susan left with Sarah, and with the heartbreak of a woman who believed she'd found a lifelong shoulder, only to realize it was merely a resting place along the path of her own healing. Lenny exited her life, but the wound he left in her trust remained. The more successful she became, the lonelier Susan felt, as if each step closer to fame cost her another piece of peace. But fate was not done testing Susan Day. After one broken marriage, she would step into a new relationship, one more mature, steadier, and the place where she would finally find what she had been searching for in vain throughout her youth, a true home for her heart. After her divorce from Lenny Hersen, Susan realized that loving someone is difficult, but keeping yourself intact within that love is far harder. She stepped into the following years with a heart more cautious, yet still longing for a place to safely land. And then Bernard Sofronsky appeared. Not like a lightning bolt setting her heart ablaze, but like a warm light gently guiding her after too many falls. Bernard was a well-known television producer, quietly but steadily successful. He didn't need to stand before the camera to prove himself. He understood the brutality of show business, and he understood what a woman who had given her youth to art needed in order to feel at peace. When they met, Susan was already a single mother. And what surprised her most was how readily Bernard opened his heart not only to her, but also to Sarah, the child who was her whole world. This love didn't make headlines. It wasn't dissected by audiences. It didn't have to compete for attention. It grew naturally, as though they had both learned that the strongest kind of love is the kind that doesn't need to be proven. In 1988, they married quietly, a choice that spoke volumes. Susan no longer wanted love to become a performance. She chose a man who listened, who was patient, and above all, who respected her silences. Bernard never tried to change Susan or mold her into his expectations, something no man before him had ever truly done. In the years that followed, they stepped away from Hollywood's noise and built a simpler life in New York. No more fan screams, no more harsh lights tracking her every move, but also no more silent tears in the dark. They devoted themselves to family, to values fame had never given Susan. Trust, safety, and finally the feeling of belonging somewhere. Of course, no marriage is perfect. They still had disagreements, still grappled with differences. But instead of letting cracks become wounds, they chose to sit together and mend them. That was exactly what Susan needed after years of chasing a love she could never name. Someone who would stay, even on the days she wanted to run away from herself. And Susan found the most precious gift a once celebrated star could ever ask for: a peaceful life where she no longer had to fight to be worthy of anyone, except herself. As the spotlight dimmed and the applause faded into echoes of the past, Susan chose to step away from the race for fame with a calmness rarely seen in Hollywood. After 2004, she virtually disappeared from the media. No new roles, no industry events. Instead, she embraced a quiet life with her second husband, Bernard Sofronsky, in a small town in upstate New York, where there were no paparazzi lurking and no fans waiting outside the door. For Susan, it was the perfect place to breathe, to heal the wounds left behind by the glory years. Neighbors rarely see her, and when they do, it is only the image of a simple woman out for a walk with her family or picking up a few things from a local shop. Susan spends her time reading, gardening, and enjoying the small, ordinary joys she missed during the many years she spent chasing fame. She does not use social media, does not speak publicly, and has no interest in reconnecting with the Partridge family past, especially after the deep emotional scars involving David Cassidy. Despite stepping out of the spotlight, Susan continues to quietly give back. She has remained active in supporting survivors of sexual assault through the UCLA Rape Treatment Center, where she once served on the board of directors at the height of her career. She may no longer collect golden trophies, but she leaves a mark through compassion, a different kind of light, soft but enduring. In the memory of American television audiences, the name Susan Day will forever be tied to two iconic depictions of womanhood from two different eras. The pure-hearted Laurie Partridge, who made the country smile in the early 70s, and the formidable Grace Van Owen, who changed the way Hollywood portrayed intelligent women in the 1980s. Two roles, two milestones, one woman. Her career may not have lasted as long as others, but the impact she made remains unmistakably sharp. The Partridge Family gave pop culture an irreplaceable symbol of youth, while L.A. Law made her living proof that women could completely dominate powerful, dramatic lead roles in an industry long shaped by men. And beyond the entertainment world, Susan used her voice to advocate for survivors of sexual violence. A humanizing chapter in a life assumed to be made only of glamour. Perhaps Susan Day's greatest legacy has nothing to do with awards or ratings. It lies in the image of a woman who dared to evolve, who refused to be boxed in, who walked away when the light grew so bright it burned her eyes. Her story stands as a reminder to Hollywood. Behind the glamour lies a battle to preserve identity, and not everyone is brave enough to win it. Susan Day was once a star so bright that an entire nation couldn't look away. But no spotlight, no matter how brilliant, can illuminate the hidden pain within. She endured a childhood of loss, a pure love publicly exploited, an eating disorder that eroded her body in silence, and professional disappointments that slowly chipped away at her trust. Yet she kept rising, determined to live on her own terms. Today, Susan chooses quiet over noise, peace over fragile glory. And it is that very choice that has become her final beauty, a symbol of America's youth, who finally learned how to love herself after so many years of sacrificing for the light. And now, after hearing Susan Day's story, what do you think about her decision to walk away from fame to rediscover who she is? Leave your comment below and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more journeys, brilliant and quiet, of those who were once loved by the entire world.